Okay, so applying for data cap. There's two ways to actually apply. How many of you are familiar with applying for data cap? Okay. So just curious, because this picture here is a new interface we have, a new website to apply. It's called filplus.storage. And you can go to the web page and click on Apply Now button. So if you have a small data set, you select one notary. It will give you a list of the notaries. Here's a picture at the bottom. You see the name of the notary and their location. And so you can scroll through the list and you can choose one notary that you want to have support your project. So if you wanted to choose someone from China, you can sort through the locations, find the notary from China. You can reach out to them on Slack, maybe say hello, and then you hit request and it'll send them a message. They will review your application and potentially grant you data cap. If you have a larger data set, up to 15 petabytes, this will require two notaries every allocation, two different notaries. So the way you will apply, again, you'll choose the amount that you need. And then once you finish the application in GitHub, we'll explain this in a minute, but there's a bot in the application that will allow notaries to sign the application. So once the application is created, notaries can see the application. Their job is to go and check for new applications and start reviewing them. It is to your advantage to reach out to the notary. If you start to understand and learn some of the notaries, you should reach out to them and say, hello, I just created a new application. You can go to it now and see it on GitHub. So that way you can have notaries looking at your application. Otherwise, it will take a bit longer if you just wait for someone to find your application. So we have specific channels in Slack where you can reach out and say, hey, there's a channel called FIL Plus Notary Review, Application Review. So you go there and you say, hello, I have a new application. You post a link and please review my application. So notaries will know to look there and they'll go and they'll check your application. If they support your application, they can sign off on your application. Okay. So the application is about filling out information about the applicant. So who owns the data? What is the data? What kind of data is it? Are you storing historical archive data? Are you storing company, personal information data? Are you storing records from a medical institution? Are you storing, whatever the category of data? You have to explain what the data is. That's the most important question on the application. Because again, FIL Plus is about storing valuable, useful data. So we need to know what data you're planning to store. What data do you have? That's the most important question, right? And then you have to talk about your plan. This is what I mentioned earlier with the requirements. We need to have at least 4 copies. We'd like to have it stored in 2 different regions, or you could also say, for example, within China region, we need to have it in 2 different regions within China. Always the SPs involved need to be separate entities. You cannot just be storing with one storage provider in different locations. Again, this goes back to the goals of FIL Plus. We want it to be decentralized. We want it to be dispersed amongst different entities so that many people are involved and the community is growing throughout the world. So there is a question on the application regarding if the data is public. And if you say, yes, this data is public, and it'll say, is this data retrievable? So in other words, will the SPs that are storing this data allow the data to be retrieved by someone who's interested in seeing the data? This is an important question. This is becoming an important topic currently because retrievability is a big part of this system. As an SP, you need to be able to make the data available to people that want to use this data. So you're potentially storing very useful information that other people want to use. you need to be able to make it retrievable. So this is a question on the application that you need to answer. Over here, I have some key fields to understand. Again, I mentioned you can apply for data cap as the data owner. I'll quickly mention that the data types, the different data types. Originally, on the application, you could just apply for public open data that you were storing. But now one of the goals of Filecoin Plus is to allow any usable or useful data to be stored. So this includes public commercial. This is business data, company data that you want to store on the Filecoin. Private data and private nonprofit data. So all of these right now are options that are out there. If you have clients who are interested in storing their data in any of these categories, this is great. But this is a question on the application. You need to distinguish which type of data you're storing. Okay, so this view is from GitHub. I mentioned that you can go to the website, fill out the information, and it will create an application that's stored in the repo in GitHub. This is called the FIL Plus large data set repo. So it's a public repo within GitHub, and you can go there and you can see all of the applications that are made. There's over, I think currently there's number 2058 is the most recent application. And as they're completed, they go to the closed status, but if they are new, they're open status. So if you are a new user to GitHub, you have to create an account. I didn't mention this, but I forgot. So you should have a GitHub account. This way you can log in and you can apply using your account. So what do we want to talk about here? Let's see. There are no names included. This is important. GitHub is public. Everything is transparent, as we mentioned before. And so you're a GitHub user. You have no name, no emails are displayed, because what happens on GitHub sometimes is people look for this information to scam, to spam you. So no information is included involving names. And the applications are managed using a bot. So what this means is when you create an application, the bot will review to make sure all of the fields are complete, and it will say, okay, this application is validated. And you can see there's little labels on each application. So this is something to learn. I think I have a slide. I might not, but there's information about labels on the FAQs. But there's different labels depending the status of the application. It might be under review. It might be an EFIL application. It might be, like I said, validated. It might be very large. So we have different labels that make it easy to log into GitHub, and you can see. You can sort by labels. So it's just another feature that we use, and the notaries will use to review the applications. I should mention that there's a colleague on my team. His name's Simon, at Simon Kim. If you have any questions with applications, something happened to the bots, caused an error or an issue, this happens, you should contact Simon. He can fix things for you. Okay, so the notary, just quickly to go over the notary's job. Their job is to log in, to look at the applications, and to review all of the information that was submitted. And you'll see what notaries will do sometimes. I have some examples. They'll leave comments. So maybe they'll ask a question saying, can you tell me more about your data? Can you send a sample? Can you tell us more about the SPs? Like they might want more information from you. Again, if you are a brand new user to Filecoin Plus, they don't know who you are. So they need to know, how are you using the system if you don't know how to do it? Who is helping you? Who are the SPs involved? These types of questions. And they will just post a comment in GitHub. And then you can just reply and talk in public to them. This is how everyone can see what is going on. Once an application is reviewed by a notary, they have the ability to approve the application. So you'll see what the bot will do is we'll say, okay, this request has been approved, and it will list the information and the amount of data cap that's been allocated. So once this is done, the address that was on the application will be sent to data cap, and it's available to use. I have some guidelines that I quickly wanted to go through. Just for me, this is important information to know. This is written, but it's also just nice. It helps you when you're filling out applications and thinking about the best way to do this. So first of all, we have obviously the link to GitHub there, right? The data set should be public and open. This was the original idea behind data sets stored on Filecoin. So if you have public data, it needs to be open, it needs to be retrievable. If the data set is private, we talked about this, but this is EFIL, this is Enterprise FIL Plus. This requires more upfront checks. So this is where you have to submit more information because the notaries cannot see the data necessarily, right? If it's private encrypted, if you have a client who wants to store private data, that's okay. But you have to tell us who is the client. They have to do a business check. We have some tools, third-party tools they can use. They complete a check and they submit the verification saying, I passed this test, I'm approved. And then there's some best practices for storing data decentralized. So if you don't follow these guidelines at the bottom, 3 or more regions, 4 different SPs, 5 copies. Again, this is the idea of Filecoin Plus, is to make sure that information is stored around the world and never lost. So these are some guidelines that we want everyone to follow to ensure that this is a reality. If for some reason you don't want to follow these guidelines, that's okay. You just have to be very clear in the application why. If you, for example, if you just want to store the data in China, you have to explain why you want to store it in China. Why can't the data leave China? Or why do you need SPs in different regions? You just have to explain everything in detail. And normally the notaries can understand this and they will either ask you more questions or they will respond and approve your application. This is one more slide. So talking about data cap usage, let's say using a round number, let's say you're applying for, in this example, five PIBs. So when you're given data cap, you're given it initially in small amounts. Because again, you have to prove that you're doing what you say you're doing. I am planning to store this data in these regions with these SPs. Okay, here's a small amount of data cap. Your first allocation will be either 5% of the total request or 50% of the weekly request. So in this case, it's 250 terabytes. So you'll be given this amount. You'll use it for some deals. And then the notaries will check and see if you're using the data cap as you said. If you are, on the next allocation, 2 notaries will review and they will give you another allocation. So you start to build trust and you start to get more data cap. This is how this system works. After the 3rd, 4th, 5th allocation, you'll start to receive up to 2 petabytes at a time, which is a lot of data cap. So we've had, there's definitely complaints about, why do we have to wait for data cap and these types of things, but it's just a way to ensure that there's the abuse is minimized, because otherwise people will just apply and take data cap and run. So this gives us a chance for you to prove that you're using the data cap as you said you would in your application. And this sort of explains how it's rewarded. So some people are confused when they apply for a certain amount and they're just given a small amount and they say, well, why is this? We follow the allocations. The bot calculates it based on the amount you requested, and then go from there. And if you need more data cap, you can always apply again. The other feature we're allowing now, you can apply for pretty much any amount that you need. So I use 5, but maybe it's in Alan's case for the project for this bootcamp, he's applying for 100 petabytes. So that's way larger, but this project will still start with a small amount and will grow. Yeah, so the options are there. And I will stop now. I don't know if we're over time. We have some more time, but if anyone has questions, happy to talk about anything. It's a bit confusing. There are many channels in Slack to help you ask questions. Myself, my colleagues were answering questions on the Filecoin Plus channel. I mentioned there's a Filecoin application review channel where you can ask notaries to review your application. I would recommend you to go look at the list of notaries. There's a link for active notaries, and you can reach out to them. You can introduce yourself so that they can become aware of you. I've heard examples where SPs and clients have met notaries in person. So if you know any notaries in the region, you can go meet them, or they ask them to come to your facility to see your storage facility and show them, you mean business, you're real and legit and planning to do a lot of storage for Filecoin. This will help you build a strong reputation.